Hello there and welcome. In this video, I want to talk about 10 very important basics of combat in Age of Wonders 4, which should help you out understanding how to stand your ground and have some fun while manually fighting these battles. There's nothing wrong with auto combat, but it is a very wasteful and inefficient way of fighting fights, and therefore we're going to go over all the moving parts in this video to get you the basics down. So, this is going to be our demonstration fight for the video. Number one, though, will happen here on this screen. I want to talk about general army setups. So no matter how you set up your army, the general rule is 50% melee fighters versus 50% range fighters. Depending on your build, you will shift the numbers. Here, for example, we have a overweight of ranged units. Most of my heroes are ranged units, and there's only 3 of these 14 units fully dedicated melee troops. This is because I can summon a lot with this build. So you always have to take into account what your build actually does change in this situation and adapt to that. But the 50-50 rule is a good starting point, and from that point on out, you can just adjust the numbers to your own liking. It just is always true that a versatile army beats more different targets than a specialized army that only focuses onto one specific part of the roster. So, number 2, quick overview about the unit types that we got. So, in the melee roster, the unit types are buffered into defensive and offensive units, and somewhat also in the ranged department, but less so. So, in the melee department, we have shock troopers, offensive units that can pack a lot of punch and knock people out of their stances. So they either cancel out the ability of a unit to retaliate to attacks, or destroy their defensive stances, or both. So these guys are good for the alpha strike, and they can also burst quite hard. The other offensive melee unit that you will see a lot are skirmishers. These guys are mobile, always come with a secondary ranged attack, and can move away from enemies without provoking an attack of opportunity. That is their specialty in general. We also have spear units, which somewhere dwell between offense and defense. Their specialty is that they have a retaliation attack more than other people, and they do extra damage against large targets. So they are excellent cavalry killers because they get that also on top of that, and also very good at dealing damage, but not so good at soaking up damage as, for example, shield units are. These guys are meant to keep damage away, and they have a defensive aura which they can spend just so as to support us. There's also a last type, the fighters. They are jack-of-all-trades units that have no defining characteristic besides average attack and defense stats, and most of the time multi-attacks. Quick thing here between multi and singular attacks, in case it is confusing you. Some units get to use only 1 point to attack. These are the mobile units. And some units get several actions to attack. These are the immobile units. They want to stand still as much as possible so they can use all their actions for attack, because they can attack up to 3 times per turn, whereas the other people can only attack once per turn, so they don't mind using the other action points for whatever, just for the picture. Now, let's move on to the ranged roster. In the backline, you will find battle mages, archers, and supporters. Archers are the physical attackers. Their downside is that they can be diverted, and they can do friendly fire. This is the only unit that can do so, but with the upside that they can deal a really good amount of damage, usually are spammable, but are also very vulnerable. Aside to that stand the battle mages, which are basically the magic counter variant of the archers. They do magic damage, usually a little bit lower than the archers without proper enchantments, that is. And they are just as vulnerable and often come with special abilities, just so as the archers. And then there's the supporter. The supporter is the lowest damage backliner and always comes with a lot of utility skills, just as the name implies, but most importantly, they also come with the ability to give a defense aura, just like the shield units. This spreads a zone of defense around themselves and gives you and your friends a lot of bonus resistances, which is really important. So now we know the basic unit types. There's also mythic units, which are always just special. They are their own category because they don't fit into any category, so any mythic unit is special in its own way. Now, number 3, heroes. So heroes are the most powerful and scary things on the roster on your and the enemy side. That comes because they can level way further than the regular troops. That is because they can equip items and come with lots and lots of special skills. That altogether makes heroes two very, very scary and dangerous combatants that you need to take out as quick as possible. And your own heroes, on the other hand, obviously need to be protected and should always focus on surviving the battle because they are just your prime resource. Okay, let's go into the manual combat. Just a quick word about auto combat. In my opinion, it is always worth trying to do a auto combat. As you see here, we have a result which loses us 4 units. That is a little bit much for my taste, but it also means that we have a score to beat, basically. You can always save the game via quick save or normal save before going into auto combat or whatever you want to try. So you can save your game beforehand. Now, let's move on over to number 4, formation basics. So this is where your playstyle will heavily differ from what the AI does. When you start out a battle, always move your troops together in teams as you see fit. Usually when you don't have a good reason to scatter up your troops, the wisest thing to do is to ball them up and make sure that everybody is standing somehow in the AoE radius of a either shield or support units so they get the shielding effect. You can layer your defenses quite easily as follows. Frontmost, spears. Behind the spears, shields or supporters to give more defenses to the spears. If you don't have spears, you can't just put anybody else in front. The shock troopers will come either behind the defensive layers or intersected between your fighters, so they can either breach through the lines quickly, or they can come from the flank. So here, turn 2, we're still very, very scattered. My formation here is not really meant to hold the enemy. This is something that you need to differentiate also. If you have a lot of shield troops, you can't just let the enemy come. If you don't, you should rather attack the enemy at one point where it seems a good moment for you. This is something that really differs from build to build. Here I just prepare my troops with just a couple of healing spells, and we're now basically just clustering up and making sure that we are ready for the enemy to come. If you have any wounded units that are battered up from previous battles, always make sure that you put them onto the back line and try to patch them up as much as you can before the battle starts. Healed units, by the way, are your most desirable resource to be on the front line because they can be, the HP that they lose are nothing you will take into the aftermath of the battle. Every green part of the HP that you lose is actual real damage. Blue damage that you take is just forgotten about after the battle, so to speak. So the formation here ain't ideal, but we are getting there. As you can see, it takes a couple of turns. Here a quick word before we go over it later a little bit more in detail. This is also a point where you start either summoning your own troops for defense's sake or pelting the enemy with ranged attacks or whatever is up your agenda. Here we're going to give those guys a nice little tickle and use the next turn. So, number 5. I want to talk a little bit closer about defensive stances. We have now the basics about formations down. The most important thing is that to go for a last point about number 4, the most important thing is that you keep people inside these defensive zones. That is really the most important thing, and after that just attack when the time is right and you'll find your pacing. So number 5, defensive stances, now for real. So these are so important, but not only for your own troops. The enemy, as you see here, uses these too. So the enemy supporter here is shielding the enemy troops too. That means when we would be bursting now with spells, they would be going into these defensive auras and be less effective. In short, when you want to really hurt your enemy, wait for your biggest guns until the enemy has been moved out of their defensive stances. You can also force that with shock troops. Some spells can also do that. But whatever you do, keep a close eye on the factors that your own troops should be shielded as much as possible, while you want to save your biggest bangs until the enemy is not shielded anymore. Very, very important. So, number 6, ranged combat. So, ranged combat is something everybody loves, and here's a couple of basics that are worth knowing about it. So, when it comes down to ranged combat, some troops of yours only have one shot, and these are the lowest damage dealers, but these are also the people that can move and do their thing. Whenever you do want to engage into ranged combat, first, I always try to pin down the enemy's front line with some of my fighters before I start shooting in the bigger picture. So this, for example, is a summonable unit. More about that a little bit later. Here, just a quick example of what we're talking about. And let me summon something here quickly that can annoy the enemy a bit for me. And now when we want to go for any form of ranged attackers, we want to make sure that their attacks are hitting as good as they can, green percentile areas, and we want to keep up as many action points as possible before we start firing. This is just the basics behind that. It is also, depending on your strategy, wise to either hold back your archers until the fighters have attacked or vice versa. Why is that so? Some troops, for example the Dark Culture, have a benefit from attacking weakened enemies, and their archers all weaken with their attacks. And some units, some cultures are really good at finishing enemies off with ranged attacks because they got a spell which does extra damage when they when your ranged attackers finish somebody off. There's way too many factors that I could iterate here about. In short, though, when you do ranged combat, always try to put somebody in front of the enemy people that will want to breach through your people, and then start whacking. If you don't do it this way around, you will start shooting one turn, and then the enemy will start running into your archers and kill everybody. That is why we want to put something sturdy in front, or if you don't have anything sturdy, just put something that you can't lose, but more about that in a hot minute. So here we just accept that the Bone Dragon here will most likely die, and we will also see how it goes. I'll be trying to kill now as many as possible. I did misplay here on my hero, but that's because I'm talking too much. Anyways, so let's move on to number 7, buffs and heals. I already been covering that a little bit, but buffing and healing are two of the most powerful things that you can do to change the odds of battle. I personally am a really big fan of just buffing the hell out of my units and healing them afterwards. So basically just tanking and spanking, if you are familiar to the term, out of MMORPGs. But this works really decently too in Age of Wonders 4 against the AI. You just need to make sure that your troops will survive whatever happens. And when you want to apply the buffs, there's one golden rule: don't buff too early. This is really important, because buffs applied too quickly can be really bad for us in one way: they expire too fast. And that's why we need to just wait it out. So our enemy summons something onto us too, and now all our summoned units will get attacked. I hope so, at least. The AI is really greedy at that, but sometimes they just like to focus down some of your troops. But that summoned guy here now gets killed instead of my real troops, which brings me directly to number 8, enemy priority targets. So in this scenario, you might have already seen it a little bit. I have been focusing hardcore the enemy's fire giant, because that was their tier 4 unit. Whenever you fight, there is always something that you want to take down, most importantly this turn, and that was shift every turn. So currently we have on ore losses 1 Lesser Storm Spirit, and on the enemy side 1 tier 4 unit. So that was a good combat. When we now prioritize things, I would either try to get a step into the enemy backline and assassinate the heroes, or in this scenario, I am actually more interested in getting rid of this and then getting into the enemy backline. Make your own agenda. Your mileage may vary. We all have different ideas of how we play the game, and I don't believe in the one correct way. I actually think that there's always many, many ways to get one problem resolved. In short, there's always something worth killing, and when you are looking for something to kill, always look for either the things that will hurt you most and or the things that you can kill quickest. These are usually the two priorities that you can safely go for and don't do too much wrong with that. So, number 9, summons and expendables. You've been seeing me using these already quite a lot here, but my general strategy always tries to have a couple of troops that I don't care too much about losing in general, because there is always the best way to work with things if you have, so to speak, losses that you can, mitigatable losses, that's what we can call. You can even take this and make it a strategy by bringing either units, which you are totally okay with dying if they do so, or, like I like to do it here a lot, using battle summons that just have a good usage if they go down for us instead of our real permanent troops. You will have to find your own way of how you want to work with these. There's here again no golden most correct concept for that. I can only say that this is for many cultures one of the best ways to maintain a survivability without even having a solid front line. Here we're losing a couple of troops now and even a hero because I did talk too much, obviously. The enemy hero was able to assassinate us, but that is okay, which brings me also directly to number 10. Retrying is very, very okay. There is a big retry button there, and you can always try it again. Here, for example, the lesson would be that we can't allow the enemy hero to walk all over us like that and work the fight differently from that point on. I knew that this fight would go horrible while I was explaining that much, so I don't mind getting a bloodied nose here, and you can see that it is not really necessary to fight a battle right from the get-go the most best and efficient way. It is most important to find out what is the most important target there and retry the battle afterwards with that priority in mind. Here we basically can now, if we want to, just finish the battle also like that and accept the fact that we have lost one of our units, one of our heroes and like that. It is up to you, but I wouldn't. At the end of the day, retry and do things as often as you want to, and most importantly, in my humble opinion, try to memorize what went wrong and try to settle down on that point again. Save your game before big battles so you can train it, because as you see here, I have a lot of experience with that game, but once I don't have my full focus and attention on things, I do miscasts and do bad things. Or sometimes I also just misunderstand a situation because the enemy roster and ability list in this game is really, really long. Take good advantage out of the fact that the game allows you to restart as often as you want to, and you will just realize how easy some things can be once you notice what you did wrong there the last time. Alrighty, so I'll leave this battle now with this relatively horrible show of mine, just to show you how much of a difference sometimes also auto combat can do. Sometimes, and that is a very, very interesting thing, auto combat resolves battles way better than I do. This is because sometimes the straightforward, I attack you in the face method of the AI is much better than me here not attacking the hero. I'm not doing this on purpose, I just want to showcase that sometimes it is just like this, the best way. Alrighty, so I think this sums up this video quite decently. This is a battle that I would be retrying a couple of times. Now that we know that this is a prime problem, we know where to hit hard next time. And yeah, some battles you have to retry several times and don't expect to resolve it right off the first attempt perfectly. Even if you are really good at the game and such, sometimes you just overlook things. Sometimes you just hit a home run right from the first hit. It really differs, and you shouldn't be worried if things sometimes are difficult. And sometimes if the AI just is able to make the thing go better than you, that's also okay. I really don't mind that much. Alright, so lots of more to say about that topic. I hope you enjoy this game's deep combat system. And whenever you have problems with a battle, retry and or do stock up on other troop types. So for example, on this fight here, one other thing besides my bad focus is the fact that I don't have enough defensive units. You can also note that down and prepare yourself next time better. So, thanks for watching, y'all. I hope that was helpful for you. Leave me your comments down below. Leave a like, leave a subscribe. Consider helping me out via Ko-fi. If you feel like my work is worth supporting for you, I'd be very, very grateful. Thanks for all the support that you guys do, and thanks for watching this video up until the very end. See you all next time.